In 2001, while deployed with the United States Army, I became a Jesus follower. My wife, completely separate from me a month later, would also become a Jesus follower as she knelt in the office of a Nazarene pastor. When I returned home from deployment, I asked my wife, where are we going to attend church? And she said we ought to try that Nazarene church that she had become a Jesus follower in. I had no idea what a Nazarene was. I told her, I said, we'll go once, and then the next week we'll try out something else to figure out where God's at work and where we can join him. We had a great Sunday morning service, and we were invited to a Wednesday night service the following few days later. And on our way to the church on that Wednesday night, we drove past an apartment complex, and I noticed that a good portion of the apartment complex had burnt down. And I told my wife, I said, at some point tonight, I'm going to find out if this church did anything for that apartment complex. There was something intuitive about that for me. Something that said that if we're going to be the church, it ought to be demonstrated in a credible witness of care to the community that we're in. So that evening, in a moment that was probably far more awkward to me than it was those that I was asking the questions of, I found a way to work in the conversation about the apartment complex, only to find out that the church had opened up its doors and served as a shelter, caring for and ministering to many of the folks that had lost their homes. And for me, that was a buy-in moment, a moment that I recognized the power of a church that is with the community. That church there in Clarksville, Tennessee, became the seedbed for which my faith and my ministry grew up. And I was consistently impressed by the ways in which this group of good-newsing kinds of folks were with the community. I saw it in a simple coat drive and amongst the impoverished that rattled and stirred in them a desire to recognize there are needs in this community that we can be a part of. I saw it in a desire to go to the jails and serve and minister in the jails. I recognized it in the establishment of a recovery program because there wasn't one that existed in our community that was reaching the kinds of folks that we believe that God was calling us to. I saw it in the establishment of a 501c3 compassionate ministry center that would service the impoverished in our communities in a significant way. There's something powerful about being with the community. I've had the privilege of serving in Clarksville, Tennessee, and then in Erin, Tennessee, a small rural community, a church that was deeply embedded in the community through the schools and through our service of the local mission. It was a church that was with the community. Far different from being for the community or simply in the community. It's about being with the community. It's about recognizing that if the church is going to be in a community, it ought to be with the community, building bridges and connections and collaborations so that we serve the common good of God in that community. Throughout the course of the next few months, we're going to be exploring what it means to be with your community. There's some instrumental steps that we need to take. Too often when we talk about caring for our community, we jump into sort of a savior complex model, right? Where we sort of don the Jesus cape, swoop in and to save the day. Oftentimes what that does is diminish and demean the work of people that are already doing good things in the community. So what would it look like for us to attend to our communities, our neighborhoods, well? What would it look like for us to build strategic connections, relationships, and to collaborate well with folks that are already invested in seeing the good of the community? The good that we recognize is the redemptive purpose of God, and whether or not others recognize that, we recognize where good happens, that's where God's at. So what does it look like to establish those deep connections? See, I believe that the local church is the hope of the world. I believe that it's the remedy for the ills that plague us, but only if we're willing to be the missional people of God, the holy missional people who are poured out for the sake of those in our communities, as we seek to establish a presence with our communities. When I look across the Indianapolis district, I see churches that are leaning in, that are eager to ask meaningful questions and to say, what would it look like for us to positively impact our communities. If you are joining us for the With initiative, you are one of those kinds of leaders, asking those kinds of meaningful questions, establishing that kind of meaningful presence. And so I want to encourage you to join us for this journey, to lean in and to learn, to explore ways where we can get to know our communities better by asking the right questions and by building and forging the right relationships. And believing that as we stand with our community, as we give ourselves away to our community, as we embody a credible witness in our community, that God will use that to make known his good news and to witness those who have been disconnected from the hope of Jesus to find a place in his good story. I can't wait to join you for this With initiative and believe in you because I believe that you are a good newsing difference maker.